Is everyone seeing the presentation correctly?
Yes, I can see the presentation well.
Yes, so first of all, thank you for having me. So we don't have an awful lot of time, so I'm trying to briefly describe the work that I've been doing and give a general overview and how the project that I've been working on fits in the larger eDoer infrastructure. So I decided to talk about the following points. So a very short introduction on who am I, then talk about building blocks and why I think they are very important. I will talk a little bit about the vision that we had on the end product and what it should look like. I'm going to shortly talk about representations and what we think a good representation should conform to. Then the general overview, and we'll end with some questioning. So first, who am I? So my name is Jarno Vrolijk, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Amsterdam. Most of my research is focused on the processes that go around gathering, organizing, and analyzing information about the context and the human requirements of jobs. So I'm mostly digging around in job vacancies, CVs, course curricula, etc. And we also look at the context in which jobs are performed. So we're interested in skills, but also in occupations and in how these work together. So actually, the story that set me on this road of looking for building blocks is a story that a thought experiment by Pierre-Simon Laplace, and it originates from a philosophical essay on probabilities. And basically, he states that if there would be like some sort of intellectual entity that at a certain moment would know all forces that set nature in motion and all the positions of item in which nature is decomposed, then if this intellect would also have like the capacity to do some sort of data analysis to this, it would be able to provide like this single formula that could describe the movements of the greatest bodies of the universe and those of the tiniest atoms. And he basically states then that for such an intellect, basically nothing would be uncertain. And even though I think there are already like 3 proofs that this could never actually be, so the second law of thermodynamics and the uncertainty principle of Heisenberg, I think I can already, I got some really cool inspiration from this, that if you basically know the building blocks of something and the mechanisms of how something works, that you can basically get a very good picture on how something works. And this basically sets me off in trying to define things by building blocks. So some examples that I could come up with, for example, are geometry. If you know about points, if you know about lines,
will your YouTube channel have a new
video? And if you know about spaces, then basically you can build everything from the ground up by knowing like the individual stuff. Same goes for knowing about integers, is basically knowing about the building blocks prime numbers. So do these type of building blocks also exist for something like the labor market? So I basically set out to set out some sort of vision on what I would think a taxonomy, so to say, from the labor market would look like. So what would the building blocks be for such a taxonomy? So the vision was to set out, was to devise a method to induce a domain-specific taxonomy, in our case for the labor market, from raw text sources found on the web. And to store this information in a way such that it is accessible to people that want to use it, and also in a way that we can use it for recommending educational resources, for example. It's also very important that it's scalable to larger data sources, since the internet is ever growing, and so are the sources related to labor markets. And there should be some sort of update and evaluation mechanism that helps us to continuously get timely and accurate information about the labor market that we can use to do better recommendations on our part. So the first thing you would like to do is to look at like existing taxonomies, right? So this is ONET, which is an American-based taxonomy. And they basically went about 2 quality dimensions. So they look at something is either worker-oriented or job-oriented, or across occupation or occupation-specific. And basically, based on these characteristics, they try to derive some sort of categorization that defines for them how the labor market should look. There's also something. There's also ESCO, ISCO, which we saw passing by earlier, and they have their own design philosophy on what a labor market should look like and how a taxonomy of the labor market should look like. And it's important to note that each of these taxonomies have their own goals. And these specific goals that they set in designing these taxonomies basically give them some sort of basically that's the only also gives them some sort of restrictions on what sort of analysis you can do with it, because by design, while very useful, all representations are imperfect by design because you make certain choices. So you put on some sort of glasses that focus on certain specific parts of the real world, of the labor market in this case, but blur out other parts. And this blurring of the other parts causes some artifacts in your data that can cause errors in inferences. So you have to be really careful in how you design an algorithm to devise a taxonomy and what goals you have in mind with the taxonomy. And I think a very awesome paper that I read about it that typically is called What is a Knowledge Representation by Davis, Kroop, and Jolovich from 1993. They argue that each knowledge representation should play 5 distinct roles, and each is important to its own basic tasks. So it should be a surrogate, there should be a set of ontological commitments. So the first point basically means that it should be an abstraction or a surrogate for the real world that you're trying to map. The second point basically means that you make some sort of commitments, what I mentioned earlier, in the design of the knowledge representation that makes it capable for certain analysis, but incapable for others. So these are commitments that you're making that you have to abide by. It should be a theory of intelligent reasoning, which I will give some examples from in the next slide. It should be a medium for efficient computation. So it should be efficient to compute. So it should not take a lot of time to rerun the entire model. It should not take too long. There should not be too much manual labor, maybe. It should be timely. And it should be a medium of human expression, meaning that it should be easily interpretable what there is and how you can use it. So the trade-off between these 5 points is basically very important in defining what a taxonomy, what characteristics your certain representation has. And this is also the reason why we decided to make a taxonomy ourselves, because we have certain design choices in our head and certain types of analysis that it has to fit for eDoer. So to make it a little bit more clear, this is also from the Davis paper, and he basically shows some theoretical, some theory of intelligent reasoning from different parts. So from economics, you have rational agents. In statistics, you have causal networks. In biology, you have connectionism, etc. And each of these theories of intelligent reasoning can help you make certain inferences about information that is captured in your knowledge representation. So this is basically why we wanted to build a taxonomy, is to feed eDoer accurate and timely information on the labor market that can help give better recommendations to individuals based on the skill that they already have and the skill that they need, the skills that they want to learn. Another thing is that we wanted to be, we want to develop our own taxonomy is scalability, and because concept hierarchies can provide like very valuable information for a wide range of tasks that can maybe be useful for like future users in eDoer. For example, automated reasoning, few-shot learning, transfer learning, textual entailment, and semantic similarity, where semantic similarity is already something that we're using basically when we're looking at 2 different occupations checking how similar they are, what skills are needed, and make recommendations based on the skills needed. Now, how would this look like in the bigger framework? So we have eDoer, and basically the Hyperlearn architecture that is built that helps us extract or induce like the taxonomy from raw vacancy tags. And we basically feed that taxonomy into eDoer so that it can help make better recommendations. So what do we have? We have vacancies. We do some sort of upper term extraction. From each of the vacancies, we can scrape like job titles, for example. Those are the upper terms. Then we use distributional inclusion hypothesis and pattern-based methods to extract terms, in this case, worker qualities from vacancies. From these co-occurrences, we can construct a weighted graph, which gets embedded, which can help us in these types of stuff. So basically makes us reason about the semantics of the embeddings. In the future, currently, we're also working on adding additional sources that can help us, so for example, CVs and motivation letters. And also a topic, I think a very relevant topic, since the EU is putting more privacy and regulations up each week, apparently, is that CVs and motivation letters contain sometimes information about an individual that you don't want in your system. So we provided some sort of privacy protection mechanism that can help us keep the statistical relevance that's in the CVs and in the other data sources without making it re-identifiable to the individual. We also did a lot of work on the transversality. So basically, transversality, what we looked at is over time. So we constructed embeddings of like 7 years. So each year separately, we can look how skills and occupations change over time, and what transversality, the impact of transversality is. So when a skill becomes more adopted in like different sectors, what does this do to the meaning of the skill and the meaning that it represents? And we also checked its influences on like different economic indicators. So I think I'm already running a little bit out of time, so I'm gonna move on to stuff that I'm currently looking at. So I'm currently still looking at evaluation methods. So this might actually be something interesting for the questioning, and maybe someone has some cool advice on that. Is that I'm looking at an evaluation method as described by Sierpinski, Schoorman, and Kundisch, and they basically mentioned already that of the 202 taxonomy papers that they looked at, basically only 63 of those looked at like proper evaluation methods. So I think this also shows that it's really difficult to find like a good evaluation metric that can help you know whether you're grasping at the golden truth and whether your taxonomy is actually making sense. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Jarno. Yeah, exactly. Any questions for Jarno? And we are well in time. So.
Oh, good.
But also it has been a long session. So that means probably we are also getting tired of Zoom. So anyone? Christian.
Yes, a quick one. Thank you for the presentation. It was very nice. I like the deduction of knowledge representation. I haven't seen that one yet. Yeah, if you're developing a taxonomy, we all know it needs some kind of tailoring, and it needs your domain knowledge and yeah, a kind of a vision of the user. So if you want to develop your taxonomy, what will it be? How will it look? What's your gut feeling? And how will it support the OER system? Where do you see the link?
Yeah, so where we are also very interested in is like how skills and adopt over time, meaning that some sectors adopt skills. So something that I think is maybe missing a little bit in the current taxonomies is that it's very difficult to see like different word senses used for the same word. So for example, AI, if you look at artificial intelligence as like an example, then if you ask someone who worked in AI like 40 years ago and look at his skills and how he thinks about AI as a field, then it's vastly different than if you ask a current product manager at a big company that's trying to use AI to implement some sort of process in a product, because his mindset would be much more focused on cloud and Azure and stuff like that. Whereas for the person that worked in AI 40 years ago might still be thinking about cybernetics and connectivism and associativism and stuff like that. So they are talking about the same term, but they're actually relating to it as a very different semantics. So we try to use transversality basically to find some sort of threshold on which we can say that we're actually talking about two different word senses from two different fields and actually two different skills that have the same term. So we would try to incorporate that sort of stuff by looking at adoption over time, which you don't see in the current taxonomies. And I think if you look at the overall structure, I think the highest level of the structure would be pretty similar, except that we have a time dimension. So it's, yeah, that. Does that answer your question?
Very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I have
in addition to that, actually, because currently we are using ESCO, and ESCO is really an expert-based taxonomy. And it is the updating process is very slow. So I think there is an update like every 1.5, 2 years or something like that. So, and the labor market oftentimes is far more dynamic than that, right? And it's very contextual. And with Jarno's work, we want to capture the labor market in motion. And we want to show this dynamic nature. We want to show that actually the skill composition of skills can be very different in different contexts. And this is what actually this technology, what we develop here, aims at. Jiří, you have a comment, question?
Yeah, thank you. Just the comment regarding ESCO. As some of you know, some maybe not, I am from CEDEFOP, the European agency responsible for support of vocational education and training, and we have a long ongoing project on gathering information from online job advertisements and providing insights into skill needs. And while we use ESCO because we cover all countries and there is simply no other taxonomy that would cover all the languages, we are first seeing that there are huge differences across languages. English is very good because it was the original language of the ESCO. But with other languages, it is not that good. And what is particularly troubling are Eastern European languages because of different word endings and the language difficulties. The database of synonyms, alternate labels for ESCO skills is simply not good enough. So this is one of the issues, building a system that, doing recommendations in English is really good and, working pretty well. But once we are moving out of the English zone, things get way more complicated. And as for the up-to-dateness of ESCO, I very much support that, what you have just said. So that we are also developing in our project a kind of a recommendation engine that uses machine learning algorithms to basically look at other words in the online job advertisements that we are not able to match to ESCO terms, and and then there will be like an expert a panel saying, okay, this is a skill, this is a skill, this is a skill that we already have, but with an alternate label, and this is a completely new one. So we are developing the system right now. We start the work because it's really difficult when it comes to capacity. We start doing this work on Southern, on Roman languages. So, and then we will gradually expand it. So we also, provide now access to this data via a service that we call Data Lab together with Eurostat. So if you are interested to take advantage of the data that we are working with, please connect to me or to Vladimir. Just, again, with regard to ESCO, is that the taxonomy is still in development. So, every now and then we have to update all the data and rerun the classifiers because things are changing. So, the work is progressing. It is not set in stone, but for research purposes, I think it's good enough. Thanks.
Yeah, so I think this this idea of the building block is quite fundamental, in the sense that we don't really have a finite list of worker qualities or skills or knowledge or abilities or whatever you want to call it. And I think in different contexts, people also speak different languages. So educators like to think in terms of learning objectives or learning outcomes. Organizations think in terms of competencies, and so there's all these there's like a Babylonian confusion, I think, in the sense that we don't have a common language, and that stands in the way of sort of progress.
Yes, and I would also like to add that I don't think in any place that one taxonomy is replacing another taxonomy, but I think that they should complement each other on spaces where one is lacking. So on foreign languages or on not English languages, then I think that using expert-based taxonomies is definitely a very good idea and definitely needed. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, it's more of a comment than a question. It's about the missing proficiency levels in ESCO, which is a major issue, and so we are also thinking how to bridge the gap, and using your job advertisements data basically to inform which skills seem to be most relevant. ESCO uses this distinction between essential and optional skills, but it's just like expert driven, and sometimes you feel there is like too much of it. And what I have commented on in Gabor's presentation, there are way too many skills with basically you can guess which could be more important than the others. So there is like a major field, potential to improve the taxonomy by basically trying to infuse the proficiency levels into it. And the other problem that we are facing is, of course, that when you look at the job advertisements, then you see a lot of skills. But we had a discussion recently with colleagues from JRC, and the discussion was about European Joint Research Center, and the discussion was about what the job ads are saying and what they are not saying. So basically, the classification went that you have like a basic ICT skills, like using a computer and stuff. Then you have office skills, and you have specialized ICT skills. And the demand for the basic ICT skills was basically the lowest of the three. But just the very fact that the person is looking for a job online and is able to find the job advertisement means that they have to have these basic ICT skills. So also like to find a balance between what the job ads are saying and what is implicitly there, but you cannot retrieve it from the text analysis.
So this is actually very interesting what you're saying now, because we in one of the last papers that I was working on, we basically looked at like basic internet skills, and we saw that it vanished from like all the job demands, like all the vacancies, and we used the transversality index to see that the contextual diversity in which it was used was like dropping like a lot. So you can signal those things with the transversality measure in a way, that some skills are just no longer mentioned, even though they are still there. Are there any other questions?
Great. Yeah, then thanks a lot, Jarno, and